friends, it's me, Bill Bernard with Pt.1. Hey, I'm just up here kind of floating around in the cosmos wondering how it all began. If there's anyone out here that caused all this. Wow, looking around up here, I feel so small. While I'm here, though, I thought I would take this time to review. If you recall, in episode 1 of this series, we examined some investigative tools to help guide us to an answer to the question, is there anyone out there? These tools can be used to investigate things like the existence of God, the life and claims of Jesus, his resurrection, his miracles. They can be used to prove the reliability and truthfulness of the Bible. In this episode, I'm going to begin breaking down the individual components of what's called the Cosmological Argument, or the existence of the universe as proof of God's existence. Hey, did you see that? Wow! Psalm 19, verses 1 and 2 says, "The heavens declare the glory of God, and the sky above proclaims his handiwork. Day to day pours out speech, and night to night reveals knowledge." So who is right? Does it matter? If the atheist is right about the non-existence of God, then there are no eternal consequences for what we do in this life. Let us eat, drink, and be merry, for tomorrow we die and fade into nothingness. If there is no God, as atheists argue, we're just wasting our breath. But if that's true, then for the Christian, all that we have done with our lives is to point people to a source of love, forgiveness, mercy, hope, peace, well-being, joy, and so on. In essence, trying to point people to a better life. What's wrong with that? It's my breath to waste anyway, isn't it? On the other hand, if there is a God, well, that changes things. I asked an atheist I know, if you're wrong about there being no God, what are the consequences for you? Without hesitation, he said, I'm screwed. He then just laughed it off because he had no fear of being wrong. Is there anyone out there? In his book, God's Undertaker, Has Science Buried God? Dr. John Lennox, professor of mathematics at the University of Oxford and fellow in mathematics of the philosophy of science at Green Templeton College, writes this. He says, Are we in the universe with its profusion of galactic beauty and subtle biological complexity nothing but the products of irrational forces acting on mindless matter and energy in an unguided way, as the so-called new atheists led by Richard Dawkins suggest? He continues, is human life ultimately only one admittedly improbable, but nevertheless fortuitous arrangements of atoms among many? In any case, how could we be in any sense special, since we now know that we inhabit a tiny planet orbiting a fairly undistinguished star far out in an arm of a spiral galaxy containing billions of similar stars, a galaxy that is only one of billions distributed throughout the vastness of space? Let that sink in for a minute, friends. We live on a tiny planet orbiting a star indistinguishable from billions of other stars in a spiral galaxy that is indistinguishable from billions of other galaxies in a vast universe. Earth is just like one tiny grain of sand among all the sand on the earth. Yet God chose this planet and put us here. Now, to me, that's mind-blowing. Richard Dawkins, an outspoken atheist, one of the so-called new atheists, is well known for his criticism of creation and intelligent design. In his book, The God Delusion, Dawkins contends that a supernatural creator almost certainly does not exist, and that religious faith is a delusion. I thought it was kind of revealing that he says almost. It makes one wonder if he's trying to hedge his bets, maybe? Along with his fellow atheists, Sam Harris, Daniel Dennett, and Christopher Hitchens, they make up what has been referred to as the four horsemen of New Atheism. The so-called New Atheism advocates the view that religion should not simply be tolerated, but should be countered, criticized, and exposed by rational argument wherever its influence arises. In fact, Dawkins, in an article appearing in the Humanist magazine, wrote that faith is one of the world's greatest evils, comparable to the smallpox but harder to eradicate. Faith, being belief that it isn't based on evidence, is the principal vice of any religion. So apparently, according to the New Atheism, not only are we Christians wasting our breath, that's not enough. Religious faith must be eradicated. Sadly, Dawkins has taken all forms of religious faith to mean blind faith. He has either wrongly assumed that there is no evidence to support faith, or he has written it off and deliberately ignored that an overwhelming majority of Christians believe that faith and evidence are closely linked. Dr. Francis Collin is an American physician, geneticist who discovered the genes associated with a number of diseases and who led the Human Genome Project, which you may have heard of. He's also currently the director of the National Institutes of Health in Bethesda, Maryland. In 2007, in his book, The Language of God, he wrote this about Dawkins' definition of faith. He says, "It certainly does not describe the faith of most serious believers in history, nor of most of those in my personal acquaintance." Someone may be wondering if the existence of God may be or can be proven with 100% certainty. Well, I believe the answer to that question is no. That may surprise some people, but I believe no one can prove with 100% absolute certainty that God exists. Now, why do I say that? Because if it could be proven that God exists with 100% certainty, without any doubt or any question, everyone would believe in God just like they believe in the law of gravity. And there would be no need for faith. But Hebrews 11:6 says, "And without faith it is impossible to please him," that is God. "For who would ever draw near to him," that is, enter into a relationship with him, "must believe that he exists and that he rewards those who seek him." And what the author of Hebrews is telling us is that no matter how much evidence there may be, at some point a relationship with God requires faith. Now, you and I have to decide. No one can decide for us. It's an individual decision. But that decision is not based on blind faith, as the New Atheists contend. We can decide based on the evidence. faith and science, or faith and evidence, are not counterintuitive. According to Hebrews 11, faith begins with first believing God exists and then acting on that belief by placing your total trust in Him. But an equal amount of faith, and I would say a greater amount of faith, is required for those who don't believe God exists. During the conversation with the man I mentioned before, who made no bones about the fact that he's an atheist, I eventually looked at him and said, "Wow, you are a man of great faith." He got this puzzled look on his face and smiled and asked, "What do you mean?" To which I responded, "You have much greater faith than I do." He still appeared a bit puzzled, so I added, "It takes much greater faith to believe what you believe than to believe what I believe." In other words, he believed with absolute certainty, with no room for questioning or doubt, that there's nothing that has ever or will ever point to the existence of God. Such a claim requires an amount of knowledge that no human being has ever possessed. At best, it requires faith that science will one day come up with the explanation that will prove 100% that the universe and all that is in it came about by purely natural causes plus time plus chance. Science will answer the question once and for all why anything exists at all instead of nothing. Well, that's faith, although it's faith in science. Friends, whether you believe in God or not, at some point, an element of faith is involved. Faith that God exists, or faith that only science has all the answer. But faith is involved either way. So now we come to the so-called cosmological argument, or the argument that the existence of the universe is evidence for the existence of God. Is the universe evidence for the existence of God? The argument goes something like this. Premise number one, whatever begins to exist must have a cause for its existence. Remember that phrase, begins to exist. We're going to talk about that later in another episode. Premise two, the universe began to exist. Keep that in mind. Began to exist, which leads us to the conclusion, therefore the universe must have a cause for its existence. Now, using our investigative skills that we learned in the first episode, does that seem possible? Does it seem reasonable? I believe it does. Let's break that down and examine each piece. Whatever begins to exist must have a cause for its existence. I want to just go back to Psalm 19 for just a second. The heavens declare the glory of God, and the sky above proclaims His handiwork. I believe that the universe does provide evidence for the existence of God. Although I believe it's circumstantial evidence, or it's a clue that points us in the direction of the existence of God. Now, why do I say circumstantial evidence? Because for it to be direct evidence, someone would have had to have been there besides God to see the whole creation occur. So at best, we've got circumstantial evidence. So remember, whatever begins to exist must have a cause for its existence. Throughout history, many people, like Aristotle, have supposed that the universe always existed. In other words, it never had a beginning. More than a century ago, Albert Einstein, I'm sure most of you, if not all of you, have heard of him, he developed a general theory called the theory of relativity. This theory, which is almost universally accepted today, has certain implications. One is that the universe, defined as time plus space plus matter and physical energy, had a starting point. And since it had a beginning, it's not eternal. It did not always exist. So as a matter of fact, through Einstein's equations, scientists can trace the development of the universe back to its very origin, back to what's called the singularity event. That singular event when it all began to exist, when it all exploded into existence. Now, this has become commonly known as the Big Bang. There it is. I know many Christians Christians object to the term Big Bang, and I kind of get that. I don't necessarily disagree with them because I understand that it implies an explosion. Explosions do not result in order, but we know that the universe is order. There is order in the universe. Order does not on its own arise out of chaos, nor does an explosion result in something positive or life-giving being created. They are chaotic and destructive. However, if I may be granted some grace here, I'm going to use the term Big Bang, simply because most people are familiar with that term. Just remember that when I use that term, I'm referring to that moment when the universe and everything in it, time, energy, matter, everything, it all began to exist. That was the beginning. It's that moment that the Bible describes as, in the beginning, God created the heavens and the earth. You have no doubt heard of the law of cause and effect, or the law of causality. Albert Einstein once wrote, "The scientist is possessed by the sense of universal causation." According to the laws of cause and effect, some act must have caused the universe to appear, which would imply that the cause is both outside of the universe and is beyond time, space, matter, and energy. It's a cause that is infinite and all-powerful. But there are those who say, no, 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 not so fast. Natural causes plus time and chance were the cause. All those things came together and then bang, the cosmos began. Okay, for that to be true, natural causes and time and chance had to exist prior to the Big Bang. But where did they come from? Natural causes would include things like the laws of physics, but where did those laws come from? Did they somehow form themselves? Laws cannot form themselves. They're not living entities. They cannot decide to do anything. They cannot form or create anything. What were they formed out of? Natural causes are something. Time is something. Chance is something. If those are something, then either we throw out the law of cause and effect when it comes to the universe, or all those things are effects which were the result of a cause. So where did they come from? How did they get here? So that all boils down to this, that we're left with basically a couple of options here. Option one, no one created something out of nothing, which is the atheist's view. And option two, someone created something out of nothing, which is the theist's view. Going back to our investigative toolbox, which is the most reasonable inference? Which is the most reasonable conclusion? Dr. Frank Turek, in his book Stealing from God, says, option two says that someone created something out of nothing. Now that is a miracle, but at least there is a miracle worker, a someone. Option one is a miracle with no miracle worker. That's clearly absurd. The universe cannot act as its own cause. If it is its own cause, it would have to have existed before the act. It takes more faith to believe that than it does to believe in a causer or lawgiver or creator. In the Encyclopedia of Philosophy, American philosopher and professor Dr. Richard Taylor wrote, "Nevertheless, it is hardly disputable that the idea of causation is not only indispensable in the common affairs of life, but in all applied sciences as well." Dr. Jeff Miller wrote for Apologetics Press, "When scientific exploration has brought us to unprecedented heights of knowledge, the age-old law of causality, cause and effect, cannot be denied. Today's dictionary defines causality as the principle that nothing can happen without being caused, the principle that everything has a cause." More than likely, you have probably heard of the Hubble Space Telescope, named after American astronomer Edwin Hubble. It was launched into low Earth orbit in 1990 and remains in operation. There have been missions to repair and update Hubble, but it's still in orbit outside the Earth's atmosphere, which allows it to take extremely high-resolution images. It provides a much clearer view of the universe than most of its ground-based counterparts. Hubble is also able to detect frequencies and wavelengths across the entire electromagnetic spectrum, which ground-based telescopes can't do because the Earth's atmosphere absorbs a lot of the infrared and ultraviolet light that passes through it. Hubble has recorded some of the most amazing detailed visible light images ever, allowing a deep view into space. Look at these. These images are incredible, aren't they? As a result of discoveries made by Hubble, most scientists now believe that the universe was not eternal, but had a beginning. Which brings us to the second premise. Premise 1, whatever begins to exist must have a cause for its existence. And premise 2, the universe began to exist. And that's where we're going to pick up next time. We're going to look more at premise 2. My friends, please remember to check out the resources and links page where you'll find links to apologetics websites, as well as some excellent books by a variety of apologetics authors. These are some really good tools to put in your toolbox. I hope you'll use these resources to really dig into your own study of apologetics. Also, I just want to remind you and ask you to please consider subscribing to Equip 412. By subscribing, you'll be able to download for free 2 chapters of my book, Be the Difference. It contains lessons for becoming a no-compromise 21st century difference maker in God's kingdom. I think you'll be challenged by it, and there's the need for no-compromise difference makers in the kingdom of God is a huge need in today's world. I think you'll be challenged by it. And if you found us through Facebook, please click like and share. And for automatic updates, please consider following Equip 412. I sincerely want to thank you for watching. I really do appreciate it. I hope you will continue on with us for further episodes. And please feel free to leave a comment or question in the appropriate comment section. And as always, please keep your comments courteous and respectful. Don't forget to join us for the next episode next week, next Tuesday, of Equip 412. Until next time, be prepared to make a defense to anyone who asks you for a reason for the hope that is in you, yet do it with gentleness and respect. May God bless you, my friends. Hope to see you soon.